Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Clean Library Podcast. We're excited for today's episode. We have our special guest, author Brooklyn Quintana. Is that right? Did I say that right?
You said it right, yep.
All right. Brooklyn is a Florida-based author. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Central Florida. Brooklyn is the mastermind behind the ongoing fantasy epic, the Phineas Fogg series. Welcome, Brooklyn. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right. So before we jump into everything, I want to read your two truths and a lie, and then we'll see if I can figure them out. And listeners, as you're listening along, see if you can find any clues as well. Number one, I speak 3 languages. Number 2, I have an extensive collection of Mont Blanc pens. And number 3, I don't read a lot of fantasy books despite being a fantasy author. All right. We'll see if we get into any of those topics as we talk. I don't think I've ever talked about Mont Blanc pens in an episode before, but who knows?
You never know. It's a writer's best tool is a pen, right?
That's right. All right. So clearly when you got to college, you knew you wanted to be a writer, but when did that first start? When did that first become a dream of yours?
I think I always really wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. I remember in elementary school, we had this program where if you wrote a short story, you get to leave class during like the study periods where you were supposed to do like your independent homework and things. And you could go to a special room with one of the English teachers and they would print it out for you and you would like cut out the paragraphs onto like construction paper of different colors and you would laminate it and draw the pictures and then they would bind it for you and you could read it to the class. I think I was the only person taking advantage of this opportunity and I did like 5 of them in like one go in the span of a few months. And my teacher's like, you gotta, actually do your homework. You can't just be writing whatever you're doing all the time. Like you have to actually do schoolwork. So I think I've always known. And then at one point I thought like I would go to film school and be a writer and director because I loved acting.
Yeah.
But my mom kind of dissuaded me from film school and was like, I don't care what degree you get, but maybe don't do film. And I was like, all right, creative writing it is. That's a practical degree.
Well, either one is creative and could have led to the same place. But so as you were in junior high and high school and stuff, did you actually start novels then, or did you wait until you kind of got through the degree? And
I think there's a couple of short stories that I think verged into being novella length from middle school. And then I completed my first like full pass of a novel manuscript in high school, I think maybe freshman or sophomore year. So I've had a lot of time to practice the craft at this point.
Cool. I think I wrote an episode of what was Rescue Rangers or whatever that cartoon was in junior high. I thought maybe I had a future as a scriptwriter as well at one point, but it wasn't very good.
I'm sure it's better than you're giving yourself credit for.
I wonder if I still have it in a box somewhere. That would be fun to go back and look at. So as you started this series, tell us about the series first, this Phineas Fogg series and what it's about and how the ideas came to you.
Okay, so the Phineas Fogg series is the story of Prince Finn, who kind of grows up sequestered in this eternal wintry north with his father, his sister, and his grandfather, under these weird, mysterious circumstances that they're told you can't go be with the rest of the family until it's time, and nobody knows what that means. And when Finn is 12, he goes down to the capital with his family to essentially meet the rest of the royal family. He's never met these people before, and he and his cousin Holland are being shipped off to this military academy on a tropical archipelago. So think Game of Thrones overall setting with a Harry Potter school aesthetic on a Jumanji type tropical island full of monsters. So it's this weird mashup of just things that I really liked. And I thought nothing's cooler than medieval kids running around with swords on an island filled with like vines and palm trees and caves and weird monsters and things. So book one is very much a coming of age, found family, adventure, classic fantasy type story. And then book
Yeah.
two verges more into like horror, and there's this cult operating in the background, and now Finn's got to get to the bottom of all these things that are going on.
Cool. So, how many books have you already planned? How many books it's going to be in total?
Yeah, so it's going to be 9 books. 2 are currently out, and the third one comes out this year.
Oh, sweet. So, are you a plotter and have like planned out each book so far, or how'd you come up with
I
9?
am this horrific amalgamation of a plotter and a pantser. I have plotted out how everything's going to go and like the exact ending line and everything. So I know where we're going. And then the
Okay.
pantsing aspect of the writing is very much like the nitty gritty in the middle bit. So I don't know all of the details. It just, as I'm writing, it kind of comes together.
Okay. Well, that works, and I I actually think there are more writers who are a mixture than a hardcore one or the other. Anyway, I definitely fall on the Panther side, but I'm now in the middle of seeing the consequences of that as I attempt to write the final book of my series.
So you completely understand the woes of writing a series where you're like, oh, I've got to tie these things together now. Like, oof, did I intend to do this? I guess I did now.
Right. And wait a minute, where did this new character come from at the very end when I wasn't planning on her being there?
Yes, I know exactly how that goes. When I did the draft of book two, I completely forgot one of my characters existed, and my editor pointed it out, and she's like, this like primary character that you had, where is she? And I was like, oh my goodness, I wrote an entire book without her. I have to go back and fix this and incorporate this actually very integral character. So I understand.
She was on a quest during this book.
Yeah, she was in
Yeah.
detention the whole time. She didn't show up.
Yeah, I think I don't really keep lists or write down plot stuff, but I do have a list of characters because if not, I will totally forget names and who's who and who's related to who, and so I have to map that out for sure.
Same. I have a list. Unfortunately, my list is in multiple places. So, like, half of it's in a journal, half of it's on one computer, some's on my phone, some's on another computer. So, compiling my own information seems to be a challenge where I am my biggest adversary at this point.
Yeah, and I just looked up like one of my main characters. I couldn't remember his last name, and I had to go back and search through the previous 4 books. Like, I didn't even remember if he had a last name.
I
And I
think
found
I
it.
haven't
It was a
encountered that problem yet, but knock on wood.
so was there a point where you decided I want to keep this clean for a certain audience, or how did that work for you?
I don't think it was ever really a conscious choice. I'm not like a big fan of the modern female author writing fantasy spicy thing that's been going on. Like,
Yeah,
no hate to anybody who likes it. All of my friends read that. They don't even read my book half the time, but they love
yeah,
like the spicy romanticy thing. And I've been to a lot of events now as an author that are themed for fantasy, and yet it's overrun by like R to X rated romantasy. And it's just not my thing. And I was that kid who grew up with Tolkien and Harry Potter and Narnia. So I really like that classic nostalgic fantasy aesthetic and vibe, like the cozy fantasy, even though it gets a bit grim dark and there's blood and things. Like
yeah.
I like a quest and an adventure and a coming of age story and like a band of brothers type thing much more than I'm interested in, the romantic lives of the characters. I want my fantasy
Right.
and magic and story to be center stage, not to be the backdrop to some romance.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you find that it's easy for you to just keep it clean like that because that's what you prefer, or do you struggle with just making describing scenes without like still keeping them clean?
I
Does
mean,
that
I
make
don't
sense?
think it's really a struggle for me. The way when I write books, I'm very much writing down the images that I see in my head. It's not I'm writing it, then I'm imagining it. It's like I can see it. So I'm going to just
Okay.
describe to you what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing in my mind's eye is that very dark fantasy, like I said, that classic, very British inspired
Right.
fantasy storytelling. So it doesn't come up, and the majority of my characters, because it is a 9 book series with the first book being a come of age story, Finn is 12 and then 13 in book one. So it's not
Okay.
really something that factored in to books 1 and 2. Book 3, he's 16. So I could see how people might expect it. He has a love interest, but it's not the forefront. There are other things going on. And even the characters that do have established romantic relationships, it's not the forefront of the story, nor is it their primary character motivation or character
Yeah.
trait. Like they're people. And real people, your love life is not your entire life. Like my life does not center around my significant other in the sense that everything else is secondary and I'm not a person without him. So I don't feel like
Right.
characters and stories need to be inextricably linked to each other and they can't exist without one another. Like they're their own people in a way, and
Yeah.
that's their story.
Yeah, and I think those classic fantasy writers, I mean, even if you're category or putting Harry Potter in that, I guess it's old enough now that you
I
could.
think it
But
qualifies as old enough at this point, at least for my
yeah,
generation. We'll call it old enough.
yeah. I mean, really, she was a master at creating that romantic tension and never having any scenes of it. Like that, the tension between Ron and Hermione existed the whole time, but it was never even a there was never even a scene about it. Like it wasn't even a thing, but you knew it was there. You know?
Yeah, I like I said, I think that you can have those romantic undertones without needing to have an entire, very explicit, detailed scene about like what they're getting up to. Because I know, at least for my story, especially in book 3, like I said, where the main protagonist is now 16, it'd be a lot less creepy than when he's 12.
Right.
It wouldn't advance the plot for us to have an aside of like what he's getting up to in a randy moment. It's like he's got things to do. The guy is a prince. There's a war. What are we doing? Like not his
Right.
girlfriend. She's got other things that are important to attend to. So it's not a necessary aspect of my storytelling, at least.
And I don't know if you're referring to the same modern romantasy that I thought of when you said that, but in that um, I read one of the very popular ones, and it felt like it didn't need to be like it was extra. It was added solely for the purpose of being titillating rather than adding to the story. So
Yeah, I am sure we are thinking of the same book, and that book very much recently has been the bane of my existence because everybody will equate it to mine, and I'm like, they're not the same thing remotely. So no, please do not buy my book thinking this is what you're getting because you will
that
be
you're getting.
very disappointed.
Oh, or by that book thinking that that's not what you're getting, because
Exactly.
that was what happened to me is I did not realize that that's what I was getting until it was too late. Um, so, do you think that in the modern industry that it's a disadvantage not to have that stuff in there in the market?
I think to a certain degree it definitely is. People at this point, I think because of the prevalence of book talk and how popular it's become, especially when the primary large book influencers, if that's what you want to call them, are all women, I think it's
Hmm.
definitely a detriment that it's always romantasy is what everybody's talking about. And that's just the prevalent topic. Nobody's discussing anything else, it seems like. So, definitely as a woman author, writing fantasy, people immediately jump to how spicy is your book? And I'm like, I don't know why that's your default question. You're not even asking what
Right,
the plot is, and it's not. And I think it's almost kind of insulting that people just assume that that's what it should be, and they're
right.
just throwing away all these wonderful fantasy books that aren't about the protagonist's relationship with another person. And I like I said before, I think that's really become romance at the forefront and then fantasy in the actual plot as just like nice set dressing. And I really feel like it needs to be the other way around, definitely. But so, like I said, when I go to like events and things, it is an uphill battle because now when people
Yeah,
go to fantasy events, they're thinking romantasy, and that's not what I'm showing up with.
yeah. Yeah, and I can see that as a female author, the people making that assumption, because I kind of face the opposite because most of the big influencers are female. Like I can't even get followers. Like who wants to, you know, follow some dude because it's just it's hard for me to break into that. So I see as you're saying that I can see that that opposite when you don't fit the mold of what everyone else seems to be doing or seeing or what goes viral and stuff.
Yeah, it's I don't know. One of the I think the biggest issues I've run into is that I think because a big aspect of my personality growing up was the quintessential tomboy. Like I had more guy friends. I did a combat sport. I liked skateboarding and things. So I
Hmm.
feel like I ended up writing a book that would very much fit that demographic of like young teenage boys to like 30 to 40-year-old men, but people just keep wanting to slot me into a completely different demographic. And I'm not saying women wouldn't like my book because obviously I like my book and
Right,
I have
right.
girlfriends who have read it, but it clearly skews towards that like young boy who likes adventure type of story. And
Hmm.
everybody keeps wanting to shove me into a completely different demographic, and it hurts because I'm like, I don't want you to be disappointed reading my book because it's not what you think it's going to be, and I don't want you to leave me a bad review as a result. And we're
Right.
kind of like in this weird relationship, me and the reader, where it's like I don't know how to get my book to the people who don't want to essentially have fantasy porn. And it has become a struggle with book talk that this is just kind of the realm we exist in at the moment.
Yeah. So how do you market your books to try to find that audience?
I do like a lot of reach outs to people. So one of the big things I do before I get into that is I guess when I scroll through Book Talk or BookTube or Bookstagram, I definitely put a concerted effort into looking at what they have read before and what they've talked about liking. Because if it's
Hmm.
somebody who's going on and on and on about Sarah J. Maas, I don't think that this is a book that you're going to like. But if somebody is like talking about Wheel of Time or something, or like The Dark Tower, then I can be like, okay, you might better fit this book, so you have a better chance of enjoying it, and I have a better chance of somebody with a platform saying that it was a good book and recommending it. So we have
Right.
that better chance of having a positive interaction between both of us. So I definitely do a lot of that. And then, like if person A really likes it, then I'll like look through their followers who have Bookstagram accounts and I'm like, okay, if they're friends with these people and these people are readers, there's a chance that maybe they have overlapping interests. I'll reach out to them. So that's been a big way of getting it out there. And also when I do like reels or TikToks and things, I make sure on the video and in the description to very clearly state like it is a coming of age story, it is a classic fantasy adventure, it is a slow burn found family. The protagonist is young, even though it's not meant for like super young readers.
Yeah.
I want to cover all my bases so nobody's disappointed and nobody like comes at me having expected something that it's totally not.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're spending a lot of time like targeting and researching to find your market.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest things that was a learning curve was that not everybody's going to like your book, and that's very obvious, but it was very much curating your outreach to give you the best possible chance of finding readers who will like it. And then they'll
Yeah.
say, I really like it. And then people who follow them or who are on their Goodreads and everything will say, oh, they liked it, so I might like it. And then eventually you're disseminating that information out to more and more readers. You're going to find your audience. At least
Yeah.
that is the aim.
So do you actually, when you find them, you reach out to them and do you offer them like a free copy to read, or how do you do that?
Yeah, like a lot of the time when I reach out to a book influencer, I will say, first off, like I said, I cover my bases with them also, and I
Right.
say this is what the book is about, and then I link
Right.
them
Right.
to my pages, my YouTube. I send them my press kit. I'm like, please look over this before you say yes. Here are the Goodreads reviews. I want you to know what it is. And then if they
Hmm.
say yes, I'll be like, okay, I'll send you a book. Or some of them I've been sending these book boxes that I have that are black and gold, and they've got school academy motto bracelets in them with bookmarks with links to everything, and then like an entrance letter to the school that's got a little wax seal on it. So it's
Oh,
just like a
cool.
bit of extra to kind of get people's attention. So yeah, like I said, it is very curated, and I will send them books and just be like, hey, if you can do it in a timely manner, that'd be great because Bookstagram, BookTube, BookTok, everything's getting very flooded and the market is very saturated. So just
Yeah.
trying to get it out there is harder than you would think it would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing a lot more work than I think a lot of authors are doing, where they just depend on if I put the right hashtags, it'll go to get to the right person and cross your fingers it works, where you're specifically looking for people who might have an interest in what you're writing. So it, I don't know that people realize how much time that takes away from writing, from actually creating the books.
Yeah, it definitely, I'll spend hours just scrolling through Instagram to find people who are book bloggers and book bloggers or people like yourself who have podcasts. And that's how I actually came across you is during
Yeah.
that curated scrolling of, does this seem like it might be a good fit? I'll reach out to them. So I'll do that for hours, and my friends or my parents will ask me why I haven't written a chapter. I'm like, I'm exhausted. I've been staring at screens like for hours, like a lunatic, not blinking. I got a headache. I need a nap. And then I eventually got it right, but it does, like you said, take away from writing a lot more than I think people realize.
Right. And, they say, well, why are you just scrolling on TikTok, wasting your time on social media? And you're like, no, I'm actually working.
Exactly. I always write it off when my friends are like, you're 30. Why are you scrolling through TikTok? I'm like, I'm doing market research, actually. I recognize I probably look insane right now because I haven't put my
Right.
phone down, blinked, or looked up, but like, I'm trying to find what are the trends, what's going on in the industry so that I can stay kind of in the know and up to date so that, like you said, hashtags, you got to know search engine optimization and what's trending to try and get in front of as many people as you can.
Right. And it'll be interesting uh, based on because Book Talk is so big, what happens to that entire audience and influencers if TikTok goes away? Because right now
Yeah,
we don't know.
that's been my current fixation. So I've gone back to revamping my YouTube channel and putting a lot of effort into getting good quality YouTube videos out and YouTube shorts, as well as
Mhm.
putting a lot of effort into my Instagram as well. LinkedIn is kind of a lost cause, I think, for authors. It's
Yeah.
more like businessy. I'll like very occasionally be like, oh yeah, I wrote another book. Here it is, but yeah, definitely YouTube and Instagram have become a very big primary focus, which is a bummer because I had gotten to almost 13,000 on TikTok. And so now I'm trying
Oh,
to migrate these people. I'm like, come with me. You want to follow me on
yeah.
these other platforms, please.
Right. And if it gets shut down before they follow you, are they going to remember who everyone that they were following? And
Exactly. It's become like a real headache, I think, for a lot of especially like indie authors who are definitely using TikTok to find their readers and sell a lot of their books. I think everybody's kind of
Mhm.
scrambling, like, what do we do now? So yeah, a lot of my focus has been I've cleaned my office. I got 3 different desks in here for filming and actually working. So like a lot
Yeah.
of effort again has been taken away from actually writing into trying to keep that social media presence up because unfortunately that's a big part of the job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels like Instagram is probably the natural place for TikTok users to go. But then I've also seen there are people that are looking at buying TikTok and keeping it alive. And so who knows? Who knows what will happen?
Yeah, it's a big question mark. I feel like it's definitely stressing me out, and I'm sure it's stressing out a lot of other smaller creators who are really counting on that TikTok business.
Yeah, and I mean there are some other apps like TikTok, like Clapper and a couple others, but they're just not. They're not going to go anywhere. Like I
Yeah,
don't see. So it's I started actually, I finally got on X to see if maybe that would be an avenue, but that just it doesn't respond as well to self promotion. I feel like so I haven't been able to get followers that way. It's more just X. The algorithm on X is much more geared towards interaction and comments and reposts and stuff rather than original content. So I don't know. I haven't figured it out, but I'm in the same boat trying to decide, but hopefully those people will migrate over and still find you and know where to look and everything.
fingers crossed. I feel like if I'm just loud enough and weird enough, people will at least remember. Like Brooklyn with the weird last name. Okay, she made some funny TikToks. Let's go find her again. So fingers crossed that I'm at least kind of getting through to some people.
Yeah, and YouTube's still big enough, and the shorts have they've kind of refined that enough that I think that'll be a good place, and people are used to going there too. It's a natural place to go. So we'll see. Hopefully, do you? So when you're doing your um, promotional videos and stuff, do you? I know some authors are like straight up acting out scenes from their books, and others are just doing uh, text based and stuff. So how do you mix it up, or how do you create the content that relates back to your book?
I definitely don't act out scenes, although it has been put to me that I probably should because there are a lot of humorous scenes in the story. So maybe like in
Hmm.
the future when I have time and energy and I'm not staring at Instagram all day, I can get
Yeah.
those out. I think like a lot of my shorts that get a lot of attention are like using trending sounds and equating it to my story if it fits. And then for like long form videos, I definitely I suppose you would say utilize my degree in creative writing, where I'll sit down and actually just talk about the process of what it's like to be an author from how do you do a press kit? How do you reach out to book a podcast? What is it like going to in person events? I'm doing a video this week actually talking about what it's like to prepare to do an actual in person presentation. I'm going to go talk to some high school students in the area
Cool.
about having a career as an author. So just
Hmm.
like things that I feel like a lot of people wouldn't think about, but it's a day-to-day thing for me because this is my job. So just
Yeah.
talking about that and then talking about like the craft of storytelling, how I came up with my world, inspirations, how to be inspired but not rip off of something else, things like that.
Right. I did. I I went and spoke to a high school group last school year, um, and it was awesome. Like, I expected maybe a couple kids would be there, and I didn't know what, but they had really good questions. A bunch of them were working on their own books. Um, like the discussion was really good. I was very impressed with them. So hopefully you have the same experience. But it was a really cool experience to the point where like they were staying after the presentation to talk to me and to bounce ideas, and like it was, I don't know. I thought it was really cool. So hopefully you have that same experience.
Fingers crossed. I'm doing 3 of them, like back to back to back on Fridays over this month. So I hope it goes well. Like I said, my first one's tomorrow with ninth graders and 11th graders. And the woman curating these talks, because one of my friends is actually doing it for careers in marine biology. So I'm doing mine
Okay.
in careers in literature, and the lady who's putting it on was like, there's probably going to be about 50 students. You're going to talk to them for an hour. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to talk to you guys about for an hour, but okay, like, let's go.
They had a lot of really good questions. I found that um, more than half the time was just me answering their questions, and they were really good questions too. So mine was, I just reached out to the librarian, and she hosted it, and she had pizza there. So I was thinking, there's going to be a bunch of kids who just want pizza for lunch, but no, every student that was there was engaged and there because they wanted to learn about writing and being an author. So it,
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I'm just happy
yeah.
when I see that people are reading, which I know is setting the bar so low. But the way we're going as like a society, I'm like, oh my God, you have a book that's wonderful. I don't even care what you're reading. Just good for you.
You're reading a book that's not an assignment or required. That's
Exactly.
just
It
for
doesn't
fun.
have pictures. You're doing a great job. Like my bar to be impressed is beyond low. And I'm like, good job. When I see my little cousin who's 20 pick up a book, I'm like, oh my God, good for you. What are you reading? I don't even care.
Yes, we're there, unfortunately, but
I'm just happy people are keeping reading alive. I'm like I said, that's why I'm not going to hold anything against the smut books because I'm like, whatever, you're reading and
you're
maintaining your
reading.
literacy. I'm so happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, have you produced audiobooks yet of any of your books?
I am working on it. It has
Mhm.
been a slog to get these books out just because they're really long. Nothing against long books. I clearly like long books. I wrote them.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting them converted into ebooks has been a surprising challenge in and of itself. So now the next quest is obviously going to be getting the audiobook out, but I don't want it to be rushed because I'm a control freak. And
Yeah.
I want it to be the best possible version of itself that it can be. So a lot of effort, again, taking away from writing, has been into, researching like where can I find like a voice actor who can really put emphasis into this and who sounds right for reading this story. And I've yet
Yeah.
to decide if like a man or a woman should read it because there are moments where like the vibe shifts a little bit and both could work. So I just have no idea because I don't have a firm grasp of what I want. So I don't want to
Yeah.
rush into it.
Yeah, it's tough to figure out. I've done a couple myself of my books, but those were ones where I was confident that I could do the characters and they worked for me. But my series, I don't want my own voice in it, and the each book happens in a different country, so I need someone who can speak, say, words in many different languages or different accents, and
Mhm.
but I want consistency of the same actor throughout the entire thing. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's like the hard part. And this is going to sound super cliche because I wrote a fantasy book with a medieval setting. I imagine whoever reads it has to be British because that's default fantasy voice. So when I write it, I do like a British accent in my head. And
Yeah.
so I just assume that that's how it should be read. So an American accent would just be so jarring, I think, just for me listening to it, be like, oh, that's not, whimsical
That's
at
not right.
all.
Well, and the fact that you think that, there's probably plenty of other people with that same expectation when they check out your audiobook, that's what they're going to want to hear as well.
Yeah, I think it is that unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you look at it, default fantasy accent is just the Queen's English. So if it's not Stephen Fry reading the book, like, is it even fantasy at this point?
I'm going to guess that Stephen Fry is probably a little pricey
He
to
might be,
hire.
but you know what? I'm willing to bargain. I'll show up. I'll go to England and knock on his door and be like, I got a great story for you, bud, Steve. Let's chat about it.
Let's do this. Let's make
Yeah.
this happen.
Let's see what we can hammer out in the details.
So, are you strictly that series, or have you written any books that aren't related?
No, so far I just have this series, and I'm going to start
Mhm.
working on releasing short stories within the world of Finn's story,
Okay,
just kind of to
cool.
flesh it out so it feels more lived in and like there's more people who exist outside of Finn and his immediate family and friends.
Yeah,
But I think I'm very scared to write anything else at the moment because I don't want it to pull me out of the headspace of writing this very in-depth epic fantasy. Because like even when
yeah,
I reread the books now, I'm like, oh right, we should delve into this more. And I have to remind myself that that's not what the plot is. Like, we can't detract
right.
this much. So I feel like if I ended up writing another book, I would somehow want to tie it into this world, even if it like takes place in Jersey in 1999. I'd be like, yeah, but there's a portal and Finn's there, and let's talk about it.
You can do whatever you want. It's your story.
That's true. That's what the fun part about being an author is there's no wrong answers. Even with grammar, you can get away with kind of finagling things a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I, you're getting out of the headspace is a real thing because I was getting down to focusing on writing book five, the final book, and I went on this road trip from Utah to Texas, so driving through the deserts of New Mexico. And as I'm driving through the desert, this new story came to me, inspired by the landscape. And so I stopped everything on the series to write this new thriller because like I felt compelled I had to write it. And then getting back to the series has been tough. Getting back into that genre and mode, it was a real thing that it was tough to get back into it.
It is. I think people underestimate how much brain space goes into remaining in your own head. And in that world, I think people just assume because you wrote it, you can jump back into it. But when I was writing book two, I got like 6 chapters in. And when I was rereading it, I was like, this doesn't sound like the same person wrote book two and book one at all. Like they sound
Mhm.
completely different. So I ended up having to scrap like 200 pages and go back and rediscover my own narrative voice and my own world and the character's voice. So I think like
Yeah,
what you were saying is you can get inspired by anything around you and then it kind of detracts from what you're supposed to be doing. And then suddenly
right.
it's like an entirely different person is now narrating the story.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know. I don't know about you on how, well, you said that you hear or you see or hear the story in your head before you type it. And I'm kind of the same way. Like I live the story, or the story takes place in my mind as either before or as I'm typing it. So like I have to be there. I have to be in it to focus. And so if I've got other projects going on, it's tough to bounce back and forth.
Yeah, no, same way. I end up a lot of times having to pull up, like, I have reference pictures on my phone and my computer for what the scenery and locations that I'm writing should be like. And I'll put on like music from my writing playlist that gets me in the headspace of what I'm writing and the mood of that scene. Because if I'm having a really good day, but Finn just watched somebody get killed in front of him, I can't come in with a really chipper narrative voice because it's gonna be weird, and the juxtaposition between how I'm talking about the scene and what's happening is going
Right.
to, turn readers off, and that's not what I want to do. So I have to like physically sit down and be like, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. Get into that mindset and like visualize that setting and the scenario and what the characters would be seeing and hearing and smelling and things so that everything is cohesive and it does sound right and it does all mesh together.
Yeah. So with your playlist, that's interesting. Is it music related to the scene? They-
So
Like a
I have a
movie
couple
score or how?
playlists. I have playlists for all of my main characters. So like my primary, secondary, and tertiary characters, each, if they're like really important in that grouping, have their own playlist with
Okay.
music that really fits their kind of personality. So like Phineas's playlist has a lot of drums and guitar in it because he has a very kind of loud, aggressive, bombastic personality. Whereas his cousin Holland, who is his narrative foil essentially, is a lot of violins because he's more cunning and refined. And where Finn is thunder, Holland is very much lightning, like he's quick and he's sharp. So I have
Hmm.
those, and then each book has its own playlist as well that has songs that fit into the overarching kind of themes or aesthetic and feeling of the story.
That's cool. I like that's like my wheels are turning now. What songs would I choose for my characters and stuff? That's I like that. I'm usually when I'm writing, it's jazz or like swing or something, and
Very
sometimes classical,
classic
depending.
kind of Hemingway vibes there with the jazz while you're writing. I like it.
Yeah, and yeah, and it's I was I was talking to a guy once and told him that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I love Kenny G," and I'm like, "No, no, real jazz."
Yeah, not Kenny G.
No, we're talking like Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington, and like legit jazz. But
Yeah, jazz, jazz.
um,
I'm with you.
um, one of my favorite series to read uh, I love a bunch of different genres, but one of my favorite crime thrillers, the Harry Bosch, and he um, threads a lot of jazz into the story. His main character loves jazz, so he talks about songs all the time. So there's actually a playlist I found that are all the songs he mentioned in his books that I
Oh, that's cool.
that I love to, yeah. So he actually talks about artists and albums and songs in the books, and then someone created a playlist with all of them, and that's a great one for me to listen to. But I really like how you do it with the characters and the scenery and everything and the different feelings. My my wife says that she can always tell exactly what mood I'm in by what I'm listening to at the moment, and she knows like how to approach. But
That's good. I like to do
uh,
the opposite. I'll be listening to like Drowning Pool or Godsmack or something, but be in just a perfectly happy mood. And everybody around me is like, "Are you mad?" I'm like, "No, I don't know. I like screaming in the guitar, I guess. I find it relaxing."
yeah, I think that would confuse my wife if I was doing it like that.
Yeah, you gotta keep people on their toes.
That's right. So, if you could go back from what you've learned now and your experience in writing these books, if you could go back to your college self wanting to do this as a career, what advice would you give yourself?
I would probably say don't get an English degree, get a business degree. My English degree has been remarkably not helpful in the majority of my work, which is surprising as I do write books. But I think with this probably is an unpopular opinion. I feel like you're either going to be creative or you're not. You can't
Hmm.
teach creativity for the most part, broad spectrum, I suppose. You can't teach somebody how to listen to like a piano concerto and visualize something completely independent of that. It's just
Yeah.
some people are like that and some people aren't, and both are perfectly acceptable. So I feel like I wanted to go into my creative writing degree searching for somebody to teach me how to be an author, but I already knew how to write. And I feel like the majority of learning to write better is just being a voracious reader. The more you read, the more you're going to understand about how story structure works and character arcs and things like that. So I was already doing that. So my English degree was really me just writing short stories and essays based on what I knew my professors would like and not what I wanted to do because I'm a grade
Right.
lover and I wanted my A's. I
Right.
think having worked in corporate America for a few years right out of school was much more useful in learning how to, write professional emails, reach out to people, how to have meetings so you could collaborate, marketing, PR, things like that. That's proven to
Yeah.
be so much more useful than, reading Don Quixote for the 10th time and talking about what the windmills really are. So I would definitely say, like, stop. Just read in your spare time like you were doing and just go get the business degree that you were adamant you did not want.
Yeah. And frankly, when we talk to authors, that is one of the biggest problems. An author's biggest headache is the business side of selling and marketing and everything, and that's the skill set they don't have. Just because of that same reason, I didn't want an MBA, so I didn't. But now I wish I did because I could use those skills in a lot of different aspects um, of businesses and relationships and everything. So I think that's really good advice. So everyone write that down.
But follow your heart at the end of the day. Whatever, go to school.
Right, right.
That's what matters. But yeah, you don't need an artsy degree to learn to be artsy. You're either artsy or you're not.
And even if you don't want to get a business degree, at least take a class or two, an elective, a business elective, to give you some of the basics, some of the groundwork that you need.
Definitely. I'd also like expound on that by saying, even if you are adamant that working in a cubicle is your personal nightmare, which it was mine, do it anyway. Do it for just a year because it's so invaluable to know A, how to interact with people you don't like, because that is inevitable in an office setting.
Oh
And when
yes.
you are an author and you are out promoting or you're at an event, there's at least one person who's going to be super rude to you, and you have to maintain a very calm, approachable professional facade because you can't just go off on somebody because then they'll be like, oh, this author is a lunatic and such a jerk. So
Hmm.
learning how to be professional, learning how to, weirdly enough, this is something I've noticed in a lot of younger people that I know professionally, learning how to dress for professional occasions and tailor your physical wardrobe to your brand is also very important.
Yeah.
Learning how to write professional emails and have meetings with people that are productive. These are all things you can learn within 1 year of working in corporate America that are super invaluable lessons to have, even with a creative profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure for you who are reaching out, basically cold calling people to talk about your book and see if they're interested in collaborating, like if you didn't do that in a professional way, no one would respond positively. Like your
Exactly.
result,
And I think
you
like
know.
another thing you definitely learn, no matter what level of corporate job you have, is that people are going to either ignore you or some people are just going to be super jerks to you. And they'll
Yeah.
respond to your email and be like, I hate this idea. And you cannot take it personally. I had one person respond and be like, it just sounds like Harry Potter with, a jungle and I hate it. And I was like, okay, weird response, not super professional on your part, but I'm not going to engage with this. So I just sent him back an email and I was like, I'm sorry to hear that you don't like what I came up with. I appreciate your opinion. I wish you the best. Because that's what you have to do. You can't react. And these are all things that I feel like are super, super necessary to learn if you're going into any kind of creative career. If you're a dancer, singer, artist, writer, whatever, you need to know how to interact with people, not just be a whimsical, fun creative. Like you have to also
Right.
like know your expenses and you're reporting, because that's necessary. You need to know if you're making money, things like that.
Right, right. Like if you want to open your own publishing company for your books and how to do that and manage your own accounts and books, and like there's so much that goes into it other than just the writing.
Exactly. Yeah. Creative
Just the
careers are a
paper.
lot more than being creative.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any other for our that would be interesting to our audience, any other authors that you would recommend that people check out?
I met a really cool author at one of the events I went to, and I actually have been reading her books. Sounds terrible. I cannot remember the title of the book, but Elias, Elias. She's cool for nonfiction. Her first name is Issa. Her book is called The Little Book of Big Dreams, and it's about people in all walks of life. Some of like the essays are from Broadway producers and things about not giving up on your dreams after you've had your first rejection. So I thought that was a really cool book. So I would recommend
Cool.
them. I'm sorry that I don't have their titles or Issa's last name off the top of my head, but you could find her.
Yeah,
Little Book of Big Dreams, and Anna Elias. Both to definitely recommend.
cool. Awesome. Well, we're about out of time, so I need to get back to those two truths and a lie. And as expected, we did not talk about Mont Blanc pens.
Yeah, so it's
Um,
all a
so
mystery now.
so I'm going to read them again so to remind everyone, and then I'll take a guess. So number 1, I speak 3 languages. Number 2, I have an extensive collection of Mont Blanc pens. And number 3, I don't read a lot of fantasy books despite being a fantasy author. So it's always you never know when someone gives a specific number like 3. It could be you speak 2 or you speak 4, but not 3. Or, well, I guess if you speak 4, you speak 3. Anyway, you have a collection of Egyptian artifacts.
I do. I have a very weird background. I recognize that.
It's cool. um, so this is gonna basically be a shot in the dark. I'm gonna go with number 1. I speak 3 languages is the lie.
You would be correct. I sadly only speak English.
Excellent. And the reason why so this is our little scorekeeper. And because Brock has been absent for the first couple of episodes, I have a commanding lead.
Yeah, that seems fair. I'm totally on your side with this one.
Well, he won last season, so any advantage I can get, I will take.
Oh, that seems fair then. Yeah, no, you needed the little head start. You got this.
That's right. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a lot of fun. And everyone, please go and check out the Phineas Fogg series. Check out her books. We'll put the link to her website in the show description as well. And please subscribe, but also share. Let your friends know about the podcast. That's the best way that will help it grow. And to tell your friends about all these really cool new authors that they may not have heard about. So thank you for listening or watching, and we'll catch you next time on the Clean Library Podcast.